First of all, thank you all for coming. I know it's the holidays, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. uh, Today, I want to talk to you about keeping up with design systems. I am Travis Arnold. I'm a designer developer here at Planning Center. You can find me everywhere at Soup or Serious. Don't ask me why I go by that. It's because I'm super serious. So what is a design system? The official definition on Wikipedia is systems design is the process of defining the architecture, modules, interfaces, and data for a system to satisfy specified requirements. So how does that apply to design systems or being on a design team? How can we use these principles throughout our applications and our UIs? First off, we have to answer is why should we use a design system? This thing keeps falling off. Dude. And mainly to avoid this. This is a this is a pretty horrible UI. Like, there's a lot going on here. The image is pixelated, so that doesn't help. But we can tell that this is, if you had to fill out data in this, it'd be a nightmare. There's just no design principles going on throughout it, and obviously there was no design system being used at the time. So if we take a look at, in contrast, a design system that is implemented through Google, called material design, we can see that already just by looking at the pieces, not even as a whole, how much nicer they look and tighter these pieces of UI look. So this is really the reason why we want a design system, is to achieve this high level fidelity of design and easily, and be able to use this throughout a team and start to speak the same language. Show of hands, does anyone have a design system implemented at their current workspace? Awesome, cool. All right, sounds good. Oh, nice. So design systems are usually composed of what are called design tokens. And design tokens are pretty much these bite-sized pieces of information about your UI. And they can either be composed like this, if it's a small little website, up to a big, large website that has a bunch of moving parts and pieces going on. We try to describe them in these little bite-sized snippets of JSON. So how can we manage these tokens in our app? It's nice to store these in JSON, but then how do we get it in our CSS framework or JavaScript or iOS or Android? Mainly we want to look to a tool for that because it can get pretty complicated trying to take this JSON yourself and output it to all these different formats. So we look to a library called Style Dictionary. This is created by Amazon, and it's used to help them maintain their design system across a large organization like Amazon. And so I've been looking into this recently, and it's been really wonderful. And it actually, this is kind of like their tagline: generate style definitions across all platforms from a single source. And we can actually take those JSON snippets, so these little design tokens, and output them. So we have a single source of truth, and we can output that JSON to CSS variables, iOS definitions. I don't know what they're called in iOS, but styles, Android, and everything else. The only thing about Style Dictionary is, though, it helps us to. Sorry, let me back up a little bit to give you an idea of what this chart is showing. Is these design tokens can all be merged into a flat system, so we can compose them together and have different teams. So say if you have different brands and things like that, we can compose all these together in a flat system and then be able to output them into all these different formats. The only downside here is we're really only working with these JSON files. So how do we handle another piece of the puzzle of design systems, which is assets, which would include things like images, icons, illustrations, most things that a designer would be working on. Because once you get the base pieces in place, so color, typography, spacing, things like that, they usually stick around for a long time. So we're not changing these things constantly, but assets like icons and images are being updated frequently. So we're trying to figure out what better ways can we keep these things intact. And that brings us to Figma. So if you've never heard of Figma, it is a online design platform. They started in 2016, and they're just kicking ass, honestly. They're doing a lot. They've become an industry standard. And they're the most, I think they're the first full feature design tool that lives fully in the browser. So it's really awesome for a designer. You can collaborate. That's kind of like their whole thing is like Google Docs of a design tool. So you can have multiple people collaborating on a design file at the same time. And the best part about it being web-based is they have an API. And so as developers, we love APIs. We can programmatically interact with these things. And let's check it out. Yeah, so I don't have too much time to put some of this stuff together, so it's pretty high level just talking about it, but I definitely encourage you to go check all this stuff out afterwards. So the Figma API is like ridiculously easy to use. You give it a token, and then now you can start programmatically interacting with your design files, which is really awesome. We can read pretty much everything we want from our design files. And so taking this Figma API, we can pipe that into the new GitHub Actions that were recently announced, and set up a CI system for continuous deployment and integrations with our design tools. So this way, if a designer updates an asset, so we say like an image or anything like that, we can essentially hook this up to Style Dictionary to fulfill that the absence of like asset management that they don't offer. So Style Dictionary can handle all your design tokens in these like simple JSON files. And we can even take it a step further with Style Dictionary and actually like hook it up with Figma's API and these GitHub Actions to have it build our style definitions for us and keep them all in sync. I wanted a better demo today to actually show all this stuff off, but it's still in the works. So follow me on social media, and then you'll be able to see when it's updated. But for now, there's a GitHub Action with Figma. So they built this whole thing, and it works pretty well. The only thing I personally don't like about it is it only will target components in a Figma file. So you can mark components in your design file, so a designer can mark their components as a component, and this action will actually run. And anytime you push to your repository, it will fetch all those assets or the components for you. The only problem with that is, as a designer, not every, I personally don't, and designers I work with, not everything is a component. So if I have an image, for instance, or something, I don't necessarily want to make that a component. I'd actually want to mark that as like an export. So that's kind of the tool I've been working on recently is going to handle this. But yeah, to keep these assets in sync. And then I just wanted to show you. So that's pretty much it. It's just this idea of being able to have a continuous deployment from design to development and keeping all of our assets in sync very easily. And I can give you a little sneak peek on the app I've been working on. It's called, unofficially, calling it FigHub. So, clever name, huh? But yeah, I'll give you, I got it. Just to give you a little idea of how this works. Hey, let me get the actual Figma file over here. Oh no, it's happening. All right, this is the worst. Hold on, sorry. Please bear with me. I'm just gonna mirror my display because this will be a nightmare. It's going so good. So you guys ready for Christmas? I mean, it's gonna be a holly jolly year, is what I've heard. Oh no, displays mirror, I'm sorry. All right. There we go. You can see everything now, yay. All right. Back on track. So this is a design system, essentially a design system that me and my design lead have been working on this past 2 weeks. And so we're just kind of trying to gather all of our discussions that we've had over this last year on our design team and kind of just put them in one place. And so that's where finding Style Dictionary and GitHub Action and things like all stemmed from. And so what I was talking about earlier, where I could only export components, that wasn't necessarily going to work just for my workflow. And so I looked more into the Figma API and ended up making my own, this FigHub library that will actually take any asset that's marked as an export. So if we look here in our icons, for instance, is it? Oh no, we good? We can see down here that it's marked as an export, and we can add multiple exports here. So we could say like we want a PNG maybe for Android or something, and we can do it at different resolutions and things like that. So what's great about this is designers get to stay in their design tool. They get to what they're used to. They're working in their design tool. They can mark everything as an export. And then if we hop over to, oops, that was a bad idea. If we hop over to here, this is kind of a really rough prototype of the FigHub app. But we can take all this information, all these exports, and get a lot of rich information about them, like if it's a component or not. We can add optional descriptions in Figma, and those will come through as well. We can see what page it was actually contained in, so you can have different pages in Figma, so we know what page it was coming from. And we also know the immediate group that it was in, which is really helpful. So say if we have multiple icons, like I showed here, so like this editor and general and church center, like these custom icon sets, we can have them all live in one place, but then by having this extra like meta information, we're able to build up these icon sets pretty nicely. Like that's the idea. So after this is a little bit more fleshed out, like you'd have this live in a repository, and the GitHub action would fire off and make sure that these assets stay in sync. And if we go down here, so icons are pretty, I feel like that's what everyone always focuses on is icons, but I was particularly interested in assets. So these are just a couple of like test like assets that I exported from here. And yeah, the idea is that I have a designer, or being a designer myself, I can create these assets in my design tool and stay there and keep a direct link to the asset that's going to be used in my web application. And this has the benefit of, if hooking this up through something like Style Dictionary, we can now export these assets, multiple assets for different libraries. And there's even another tool similar to Style Dictionary that just came out recently called Diez, D-I-E-Z. And they're doing something similar. You write TypeScript instead of like JSON files, so you have full type safety, which is really great, and they generate the types for you. So that it's still a little, it doesn't have like a full feature set yet, so you can't like extract SVGs right now from Figma. So they have a tool that works with Figma to extract these assets, but it's kind of limited right now, so that's why I dove in and tried to make my own. But yeah, so the whole idea is just having a continuous deployment setup for these assets, so we don't break the link between them. So we don't have to go to our assets folder and say like, hey, Gio, like where's that asset? Or Gio would ask me or something like, hey, where's this asset at? Like I don't know where it's at. I need to update it. I got a card or whatever. I have to get this thing done. This way, hopefully, we can push out our updates for assets almost automatically, so a designer can do what they need to do. And the system knows that we need to push out an update, or a designer. This was another thing I was working on, is how a designer could possibly flag when an asset needs to be updated. Because you don't necessarily want to do this all the time, right? A designer might have made a change, and you're like, I don't want to pull the file yet and actually use that asset in production yet. But yeah, just another way to set up a system to help you do more of what you want to do. And that was pretty much it. So thank you. I really appreciate it.